welcome to the kickoff for the exciting STEM week. I met Danya last year at the Head Start West STEM conference, which was in Las Vegas in person, and it's great to see some variety now because I know Head Start West. You come from a wide area or wide regions, many states, and it's nice to have it online so you can avoid all the travel. And it's not quite as nice as being in person sometimes, but then on the other hand, it has other benefits because we can see each other eye to eye, face to face. And so there's pros and cons to both in person and virtual, and it's fun to mix it up. So this virtual workshop I presented this many times since COVID when we're all gotten used to the virtual thing. But I do want to say before we get started with the slides that I always do incorporate a hands-on, no matter whether it is virtual or in person. So I hope you all have brought some basic art supplies. The simplest thing is possible, crayons and paper. Because we do want to reinforce with our hands, when we think about STEM, and I'll segue now into the content of STEM being all around us. STEM is a sensory, we engage through science, maybe not technology as much, but science, engineering, math, yeah, all of these things we engage through our senses. We know when we work with children that the world is about sensory play, sensory engagement, and we know that the brain literally grows new pathways through engagement through the hands with the environment, seeing how the properties of materials, seeing how things change state when you combine two different materials, a liquid and a solid, all these kinds of things that we know as adults are the world of science all around us. Well, those are what we engage through the senses. And so that's one of the reasons why I think it's so important to include hands-on sensory play when we're talking about these topics. So let's move on here. The idea again is about how it's everywhere around you. You don't have to buy a STEM kit to incorporate science into your everyday work with children. And while there are many fun STEM kits out there, and you can find other STEM ideas on Pinterest and all the other resource places you go to, but I believe, many of us would say, especially if you've been around for a while, if you're an experienced human, an experienced teacher, that the art of teaching is sometimes just finding the teachable moments that are there already, not because you pulled something off your shelf, but seeing what's actually happening, seeing where a child is, seeing what the weather's like, seeing what the mood is, and actually working with what's present right in front of you. And then interpreting the content of science, of math, like what's the math in this? We're standing in line. What's the math in this? We are measuring things. We're exhausted. Our bodies are depleted. What's the science in energy and feeding ourselves and then breathing? What's the science? Why do we stop and do these mindfulness activities to breathe and reset and self-regulate? Why do we do this? What's the science behind that? And simplifying it so that it is accessible to a child. So that's the art of teaching. And you learn that through experience and mastering, kind of taking all the theories that you've learned and applying them in practice. And that's what I invite you to do with this intro session, is to just open up your mind and your eyes to the science that's all around you. And so I've got a lot of visual ideas here. Sometimes people like to just use I know I do. I take my camera and I think, oh, I want to remember that. I just snap a pic of it. So all of these are things that you might have tried already, but it's just a refresher, like, oh yes, this one on the top right, like who hasn't taken a vegetable and cut the top off it and watched the top grow? Well, because with my own two children growing up, I got to practice a lot of these things. And I kind of forgot that a beet will do this too. A carrot will do it. Lots of vegetables, if you cut the top off, they will actually grow. And I actually have a horseradish that I've had in my family for probably 6 or 7 years. That's the same horseradish plant that came from a top like this, and we grow it grows every year, comes back. So those are the kinds of things that I invite you to think about. Oopsie, hold on. Oh. I don't want to get stuck here, but there we go. So outdoors, of course, when you think of STEM, so much of it is nature based. And so outdoors is where you can really have fun with it. Not sometimes you do have to be inside. Your teaching environment isn't always outside. It would be nice if it could be. But somehow, sort of taking advantage of kind of fun, silly things that you could do just with planting alone. Like we all know we plant seeds. Planting, growing, the life cycle is all around us. Here we are. What month is it now? It's March, right? So I don't know where you live, but April showers bring May flowers and all that kind of stuff. It's the season of new birth. And so it's a good time to plant seeds in things that are unusual. Like this one in the middle is just a crazy, silly idea, but I found this one on the internet and I thought, who doesn't have an old pair of jeans they don't use? And just, stapling, getting a staple gun, stapling it to, some kind of wooden structure, doing fun, creative things like this with old stuff that you fill. And usually if you get teacups or these boots on the bottom, which you can find at thrift shops or just, find them at yard sales or just get some of your old new ones. The trick, of course, is to drill a hole in the bottom. Why? That's the science, that's the physics of water and drainage. And then talking about that, why do we drill a hole in the bottom? And if you just the simple drills, you can bring your own drill in from home. To drill a teacup is not so easy. Why? It's a hard surface. So again, what's the difference in drilling in a rubber boot versus drilling in a teacup? Well, it is different, but you can just get a different bit from Home Depot that works perfectly for ceramics. And what's the science behind that? Why do you need a different bit in your drill? And all these things, you can bring an old-fashioned egg beater in and talk about drills. And again, that's the physics of drills and force. And there's so much that goes on just around us. And then using some of your old science from high school or college, whenever you last studied science, and think, oh yeah, there's something in this that if I just research it a little more, I'll find a simple way to explain that to the kids I work with. So again, this everyday stuff. So rock salt is a wonderful mineral. And it's good to work, I know, especially in Head Start and in most childhood programs that work with in impoverished areas where there's a lot of food shortage. You're not supposed to, allowed to, and there's, great morality to not using food in your craft or your loose parts programs. But salt is something that, is not consumed in that way. Nobody's going to bed hungry because they didn't get enough salt. So you can use that. And salt is a mineral that comes in all different shapes now, thanks to so much emphasis on gourmet cooking. You can get sea salt, you can get ice cream salt or rock salt, and rock salt is the biggest of them, ice cream salt. You can buy it at your grocery store, and it's very dense. And so if you put it in food coloring or liquid watercolor, like we did on the left here, it will slowly absorb, slowly because it is dense, and it will become a colorized rock that breaks on facets, just the way a crystal does, because all rocks like salt are a part of the crystal family. So again, it's the properties of materials. When you're studying science, you know later when you learn more about the elementary, middle school, and high school versions of science, and you think about the scientific method, a lot of it is about still the properties of materials, both living materials and non-living materials. That separates. But with young children, oftentimes it's most interesting to look at living materials because they change. And young children, of course, are very concrete. they're not going to understand abstractions. And so the living things right around them, the salt, the plants, the worms, these are entry points, of course, into your world of science. But taking it and then really examining, what can I say about those worms? What can I learn about those worms? The worms you can touch. The worms are like weird. Sometimes worms are, I know they're one of my first sensory science memories as a child. Do you remember what it was like for you to first see a worm? Sometimes you're only going to teach things with enthusiasm if you connect somewhat to your own experience. And so because I always loved art, I always loved crafts, I always loved making things. I today actually will get a big kick out of like holding up one of those rock salts that are dyed and it's watching the light refract through it. I like that still. I always did. But not everybody is like, you're not maybe a sensory person yourself. Maybe this wasn't you. Maybe you're not like a sensory seeker. Those developmentally, neurologically, some of us are more sensory seekers than others. But if you're a sensory seeker, you probably have a lot of memories about worms and things that you touched. Or how about what is that, the dandelion flower that grows out of a weed and blowing it and watching it disperse? I mean, that is magic. And if you're so busy in your to-do list, as so many of us as educators are now, because you're called on to do so much, and so much that's not fun. I mean, so much that has to do with documentation and tracking everybody and accountability, that sometimes you're so busy thinking about, the rules and regulations of working in early childhood that you forget, oh, what I'm here to do is get in touch and think about the magic of blowing on a dandelion and watching all those little seeds disperse. So it's a big ask, especially now as we're still recovering from the COVID-19 aftermath, of the lockdown. Children are in such dysregulated states. We're all on stress overload. And so getting in touch, remembering to get into your own joy about what it's like to work with chalk, what it's like to get chalk on your hands, what it's like to feel the grain of the concrete as you put chalk onto concrete. And the big chunky chalk, the stuff that's called sidewalk chalk, that's much more porous, right? But all those things, all the porous, what does porous mean? Use that, take that. You could get a piece of sidewalk chalk and a piece of blackboard chalk. And what very different densities. These are properties of materials. What does that matter? What is that more dense? And you take that. What's more dense in terms of something you eat? What's more dense, a piece of bread or a cracker? Finding, that's again the art of teaching, is taking what's already there and finding the teachable moments in what's there. So chalk, which is sometimes because of asthma and things, now they have dustless chalk. Sometimes the regulations of childcare have come that sometimes you can't use glitter, you can't use chalk. And so you've got some limitations there. But depending on your program, you can probably still use some kinds of chalk, but it comes from a mineral, just like salt. It comes from the earth. It's all earth science. And sometimes we forget. We forget that a piece of paper is earth science. A piece of paper is a tree. Is that too bizarre? I mean, you really do lose track of that because it's just bizarre to think about that a paper comes from a tree. So one of the ways, again, we don't have much time here. I'm going to keep track of time so we have time for our hands-on. But one of the things that gives those everyday possibilities around you, that gives them some authority, is to give them a name. That's sometimes just, the name of a title of a book, the title of something, sometimes it draws people in. So if you call just touching the trees and bushes around you investigations, hunting, examinations, you get out your little eyepieces, aroma investigation, because around you, even if you go on a nature walk anywhere, you'll see Leaves have smells, flowers have smells. And one of the things that I find really interesting is how many flowers have colors and no smell versus smell no color. Those are those different ways you can actually keep track. That's a mathematical finding order in the world around you. Which of the plants in your yard or on your walk, like this one here at the bottom, which is a petunia, if you might recognize that little, it's kind of a common plant in California where I live. It's got a loose, fluffy, colorful leaf, but it has almost no aroma, which is like, that's interesting. I'm sure there's some botany behind that, some biology behind why it attracts certain, insects, pollinators. But these are the kinds of things that I invite you to open your eye to and just start thinking about. How about gourds? This is and encouraging. I know of Head Start in particular, of all the types of childcare agencies that you could work for, Head Start does the best job of any of including the family. And so, encouraging your families to just go on a nature walk and call it a nature walk. Don't just go on a walk. Let's go on a nature walk. You call it a nature discovery walk. Who can discover? Can anybody find a pine cone? Let's find a seed pod of some sort. Because that's all a pine cone is. It's a seed pod. And any neighborhood will have some seed pods. So painting gourds and just encouraging. This is a young father here on the left. Look at that. He's just like, he's present. Sometimes families think, oh, I'm going to let my kids do some hands-on stuff here so I can take a break and look at my cell phone. And you're going to do that sometimes because you do need a break sometimes and you need to look at your cell phone. But what happens if the father, look how he's posing with such love? It's like he's engaged too. And so the son will begin to feel like, oh, this is a nice attachment activity, a nice bonding activity. So any neighborhood, whether you live in, a wealthy neighborhood or an impoverished neighborhood, you're always going to have, dirt and sand, stuff like that, and obviously in Head Start, you're working in areas that don't have, extra resources, but there's so much you can do with, I love mud painting. This I discovered just at a conference I went to, and I took a picture of this. We did a site visit of a place that had really good STEM activities here in Pasadena. It was in Pasadena, which is close to where I live. It's kind of a hub for STEM because Caltech is there. They have a great child development program. And there's a number of schools that are really big in, I think, so the outdoor classroom. It's like a hub regionally. And I happen to live close by, so sometimes I get to go to those conferences myself. And this mud painting was there, and I thought, that is so clever. It's just pails, but they make it look so good. And they got the brown paper, which you can use paper bags too. You can use the inside of grocery bags, but paper, next time you order some construction paper, it does come in brown. And the mud really looks good on that. Just mud painting looks good on that. This was, excuse me. We're going to stop in a moment to do our hands-on. But I love collecting leaves, and there's been a lot of drought in California, and over the years, the last few years, bad drought in Los Angeles, where I live, where all the fires were, needless to say, or not only in LA, but amongst all the fires in California, LA got hit really hard. And so there's a lot of streets that have had no water for so long. And I went and did a weed collection activity in some old, truly impoverished back alleyway. And I found a lot of stuff just to kind of prove the point that you can make something out of nothing, which is a beautiful recycling idea. And and I did this at a longer workshop where we made little accordion books from these weeds. And using it as vocabulary, like brown, sooty, parched, all those new vocabulary words that you can come up with for stuff you wouldn't normally look at. So again, living, non-living, change of state, these are all terms. One thing you can do, just putting watercolor out with salt, the best way to sort of really capitalize on that change of state. because salt on top of watercolor will give you these wonderful crystal patterns. So that's a great thing just to leave out in any room at any time. And then if you haven't done this contact paper and window art in a while, that's sort of, early childhood 101. But a lot of times, if you're a new teacher, maybe you never got this is these classic things. Or if you've been doing it for a while, it's just time to recycle it, do it again. But clear contact paper really, this version here on the right is actually, that's kind of semi-opaque. It's not actually a very particularly good example of it. I found that on a preschool wall somewhere when I was doing a site visit. But you can get the contact paper today comes even more clear than that. But what this center director had done, or the teacher had done, she had people collect both tissue paper, which is the little pink, and then some real leaves. So she combined living and non-living, because I think her idea was to kind of make it look like spring, a spring landscape. But it's just always good to show translucency, transparency. That's another properties of materials. Can you see through it or not? Is it opaque or is it transparent? And what does that mean? Is it see-through or not? And the one on the top right, a lot of people like to do sun catchers because that capitalizes on light refraction. Again, a lot of science is about light. Color is all about light. Shadow is all about light. So much about just light itself. You can just, everything, you can see the world through light and shadow. But this is a nice way for young kids to put, this is just glitter paint between two pieces of wax paper. So it's a nice quickie version, and then they get to squish it around. So very young children or children who have a lot of physical or developmental delays can still do this. And then you can still put it up and see through it. So I'm just going to toggle just really quickly through these, just gathering things. I'm making making little patterns with them. So much stuff you can do. And just a reminder again of the sensory play, sensory sensation, that children's brain pathways. This is literally brain science tells us this. It's verified with evidence-based research, all that good stuff, that that the pathways are connected through a child's self-directed play with their environment. It's a bottom-up to learning. They are literally creating their own knowledge. And so you want to provide, here's ice tunnels. I've got a lot of these lesson plans on my website, which is Creative Play LA, and you can download them for free. I love doing ice tunnels. This was a Head Start teacher in Colorado years ago that I did. I flew into Colorado and did a whole bunch of sensory play. These are all just ice with salt and liquid watercolor or food coloring on top. A great outdoor activity. And these special occasion activities are wonderful. But again, they're not your bread and butter. Your bread and butter, as a person who wants to have STEM all around them, is to take not the special occasion thing like this, which is a lot of fun and makes for great photos. And it's very memorable, but it's to do it every day and say, what's the science here? What's the math here? And let's ignite some of my own memories of my own sensory experiences of childhood. In my childhood. So this one, citrus, I know, again, even though food is prohibited, I always, depending on how much you're willing to stretch the rules, I always say you can take some slices and make lemonade out of this, so that you can take just a little bit off of it and then have things to eat and drink with that later, because citrus is so beautiful. It is so beautiful, and it makes so many nice ways to engage kids, the smell and the taste, the sour. When was the last time you remembered, where on your tongue do you taste sweet versus sour? You probably heard that growing up, like there's some place that your tongue registers sweet versus sour. What an interesting thing is that? And if you forget what it is, now you can just Google it and remember, but then experiment with some sugar and some lemon. Where does it hit the most on your tongue? So I have this science STEM and science sort of a derivative of this these same slides on my website, and it is a free download, the whole handout. So it originally started with my workshop, which is STEM and creativity in the outdoor classroom, and I just sort of pared it down for you here because we have less time. And it's our focus is a little different anyway. So now I want you to get out your hands-on activities, and I mean hands-on stuff, and I'm going to go to the hands-on activity. And I've got here in front of me a bunch of crayons and a paper. And so I'd like you to do the same with whatever you have in front of you. Get it out and trace your hand with one of your dark colors. If you have a marker, that obviously makes a nice clean trace. If you don't, you can do it with whatever you have. I'm going to do it here, and you do that there. Just go ahead and do step one. And next, we're going to do a little bit of relaxation before we get into the prompt. I've got two prompts for what to do with your hand and why it's going to connect to STEM. But now you've got your hand, so you've got that. You just set that down, and we'll be going to the next step in a moment. But first, I want you to we're going to do some, actually, let me go back here. Let's everybody sit up straight. I want you to do a little grounding activity, I guess you'd call it, a little mini meditation, a little mini sort of getting out of our heads and into our bodies so that we can relax and do some art together. Some very simple art. And art, as we know, I'm sure you've all heard of STEM to STEAM. So art putting A into the STEM activities. So it's STEM, STEAM, art. So the STEAM, which is the way to teach the STEM theories, is through hands-on engagement with art. And art gives you so many materials to work with, so many different materials that have different properties and that combine differently and have changes of state. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to sit up straight so that our lungs can fill with air without our bodies slouching over and crunching over our lungs. We want to get our lungs nice and straight, so we're going to sit up so that the air can enter into us. And we know from our, little brief studies of mindfulness and regulation how to create calm in our bodies and how we are co-regulators for the students we work with. It starts with us as the leaders of the classroom, that we have to be as calm as we can. We can't always be perfectly calm, but as calm as possible, given our current state of rest. And one of the best ways to enhance the calm is to take 3 intentional breaths, and not just breaths at your chest level, but belly breaths through your diaphragm. So one way to see, are you doing belly breaths, is you can put your hand on your chest and one hand on your belly and just feel the difference. When you belly breathe, you really get a much, much deeper aeration, because that's what you're trying to do. You're trying to oxygenate. You're trying to get all your body cells to have the benefit of fresh oxygen. That's the whole point. And so through the belly breathing, you get that. And 3 deep belly breaths is a way to really, really change your physiology and create greater calm. And it might just be a little bit, but it doesn't matter. Just greater calm in the direction of a little bit makes a big difference in the trajectory of your nervous system. So again, place one hand on your heart, one place on your belly, and we're just going to look at these jellyfish to relax our nervous system. So just try to get out of your thoughts into your body. Take 3 deep breaths on your own, and we'll just do that as a grounding exercise before we begin. Drop your shoulders. And loosen your jaw. Feel your body relax into your seat. And remember that your body is your best friend. And by letting go of the tension that you're holding, you're giving it the rest it deserves. And just like these beautiful jellyfish, all your cells are in action, they're in movement, they're actually flowing, just like these jellyfish, all the cells, the cortisol, the stress hormones, you want to let those go. You want to let fresh oxygen relieve the tension. And you want to do this with your children and teach them that this is way better than alcohol or drugs or overeating. Learning about your body and learning to really treat it like your best friend. Even though you're working with very young children, they're learning from you how to really go from the inside out to rest. Not to put a Band-Aid on by just eating some chocolate. Not to put a Band-Aid on by just throwing a chair because you feel so out of sorts you don't know what to do. Or hitting somebody. Or having a complete meltdown because you're just completely in a chaotic sense of nervousness. You have no idea what's going on. And so you want to know, I pause and listen to my body. If I treat my body as my best friend, I can help restore a sense of calm. So those are just the lovely, lovely lessons that we can teach our young children now, because we didn't grow up with those mindfulness kinds of things, and now we have to stop to help them regulate, because the world is so dysregulated after the COVID lockdown. And now with so much else going on in the world political state, goodness knows, even though children don't read the newspaper, they hear us talking about it. And they're aware that there's a lot of uncertainty in the world. And so getting in touch with your own sense of joy, your own sense of grounding, so that you can co-regulate, is really just the bottom line, the most important thing for you as an educator, to get into your own sense of calm. And so when you're teaching STEM, a lot of it is that, what is the joy in nature for me? Why do I find going for a walk calming myself? Why, when I get home from work, does sometimes just fiddling around in the garden or taking my cat, you know, and hugging my cat. All the sensory elements of my world are what help me feel comforted and safe. Safe, that's the key, safe. So let's just take a moment here to go back to your first sensory science memory. So just either close your eyes or just, you know, put your gaze downward so you're just kind of blocking out the world a little bit and think about what was it when you were a child, the earliest that you remember. What was an exciting first memory for you? I have, because I'm going to ask you to just doodle that a little bit in your, inside your hand. We lived in an apartment when I was growing up, and there was a vine up the apartment wall, and I remember a robin's egg. Or one time I remember when I first went to the ocean, and I remember the wave. The wave of the ocean was totally freaky because it was so strong, but it was very exciting. This is what I remember. So I want you to draw out that memory the way you see it here. Here's my wave using line, shapes, and colors. Just take a few minutes for that. I'll put on some music if I can do it because we're soon out of time. But I'm going to see if I can get a little music and just whatever you would like to do, just begin and keep going. Just keep going. Add some more. Make it a nice doodle that takes you back to your childhood.
Cresci nascosto lontano dal sole, tu sei prezioso e resti nel cuore, fiore d'inverno.
To use this feature, please make sure your app is running and can access the internet.
Tu è passato. Fiore d'inverno, fiore discreto, un ciclamino che nasconde un segreto. Io ti ho osservato vicino a un prato, prima un seme poi un bocciolo è spuntato. Fiore d'inverno con i tuoi colori, rallegri il mondo quando piove fuori. Fiore d'inverno, fiore tenace, un bucanere che ricorda la pace. Tu non gradisci troppa attenzione, senza timore con la neve o col sole. Fiore d'inverno, fiore coraggioso, che questa vita resti sempre un bel gioco. Fiore d'inverno, fiore coraggioso, che questa vita resti sempre un bel gioco. Fiore d'inverno, fiore coraggioso, che questa vita resti sempre un bel gioco.
All right. Well, I've got just a few more closing slides, not too much because we are almost out of time, but just to show you, you know, the lesson plan of this kind of activity. If you were to follow it up and have more time, you could do something like this. Here's one that we did for a longer workshop where the second prompt was to just sort of illustrate the feelings that you felt then as a child. And so all of these are simple ideas that you can use in parent workshops. It's a nice way to reinforce some of what you're trying to, how you're trying to engage children in the world, so that you can have more carryover at home. This makes a great parent workshop if you have such things now and then, because it uses very simple supplies and just really relies on their own personal feelings. So thank you for joining us today. There's my website, and I do have a whole lot of free handouts up there. I've been doing this for over 40 years and worked a lot with Head Start over the years, and which I always enjoy. So if you're looking for a new resource, I have plenty of stuff on there that you don't have to pay for. And it's a pleasure to be involved. I know that Danya has a couple of last minute closing remarks, so I will stop share so you can be on your busy day. And thank you again for joining.